This video is brought to you by Against the Flow of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is a book about Jake Fayard, a Marine veteran who is unhappy with the political machine running the state of Mississippi. He decides to fight the corruption from the inside. Jake will face more challenges than he ever has and will stand up for what he thinks is right. His notoriously hot temper will push him to the edge of murder, along with his friend and brother Kobe Barhanovich. Together, they will fight the system and give the power back to the citizens of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is now available on Amazon. A link to the book will be placed in the description below. Welcome to History in the Eyes of a Southerner with your host, Anthony Allen. On this channel, we will take a journey through time and relate history to the contemporary eyes of modern America. I hope you enjoy the ride as I investigate and document the wonderful events that have shaped our present world. Alright, y'all. So, I have acquired a new desk. Got my radio stuff behind me. If y'all see anything out of place, yeah, I'm working on it. It is what it is, though. Anyway, I have actually been watching a movie based on Jim Garrison's book. Those of y'all that hadn't figured out, the 1960s was a very interesting time in history in this country. We had the fight with communism. We had JFK assassination, racial tensions were higher than probably any other time in this country. Was a very unique time. And, I feel like I want to do something on the Kennedy assassination, but I don't want to rehash. I don't want to rehash somebody else's well-publicized theories or things that have been deemed conspiracy theories. I actually want to look at some of the stuff that's going on and investigate what I really think happened. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think Jim Garrison was definitely on the right track. I do not think that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. Yeah, I'm in that camp. I know there's some... See, I'm still moving stuff around, y'all. Trying to get this out of my way. I'll get it together eventually. But I am of the opinion that there is no possible way that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. Now, what is my proof? To say that I have concrete proof that I could take into court would be a lie. However, common sense dictates that it is physically impossible. You do not take an old piece of junk Italian bolt-action rifle as he did. And I'm a pretty good shot myself. grew up. I've been shooting for 30 plus years. I'm 38 years old. I don't miss. I'm not the best shot I know, but I could hit my target fairly accurately, without hesitation. That being said, if you can take a bolt-action rifle, and I do not have one with me at the moment, but if I did, I could show you. But if you take a bolt-action rifle and you can get off 3 rounds in what do you have, 10 seconds or something like that? Boy, you doing something. Now, I can take my 9mm and get off that many rounds real quick, but that's a semi-automatic weapon. AR-15s certainly existed in 1963. They weren't as popular as they are today. But of course, with an AR-15, you're going to have, you're going to have a report of the round anyway, but you're going to have more of a report of the round. Especially if you go, full auto. Like an M16 is full auto. AK-47s, obviously, they existed back then, but this is not what he used. He used a bolt-action rifle. And a pretty crappy one at that. Probably paid like $25, $30 for it back then, which is nothing. Maybe less. Hell, I've heard people sit there and say that back then you could get old World War II British 303s for $15, $20 out of a gun store, out of a catalog. 7.7 Arasakas, Japanese weapons, 7.5 French. These are weapons that you could get cheaply, that were decent quality. They're combat tested. But this old Italian rifle he had was like bottom shelf, man. If you're into guns today, I would say that it lines up with like what us gun enthusiasts think of a High Point, a Jennings, a Sky. It would fit in those categories. So if you can take that weapon and you can get off 3 rounds that quick, boy, you doing something. Here's the problem with old bolt-action rifles of the era back then. A lot of them, the bolt would stick. So what you would do is you would take it and you would pull it back, and then when you would go forward, sometimes that bolt would stick, so you'd have to give it a smack. Or when it come to locking the bolt, you'd have to give it a smack like that. That cheap Italian weapon didn't fail like that? Didn't have a failure to feed like that? You telling me? I beg to differ. Okay, so he was a Marine. Marine Corps training isn't going to train you for that. I know some Marines that just can't shoot, believe it or not. No disrespect to the Marine Corps. But there are some out there that can't shoot. There's some very good shots in the Marine Corps. There's some excellent shots in the Marine Corps, don't get me wrong. But not every Marine is an expert rifleman, so you can't really attach that credential to him. Maybe he was an expert shot. Even so, 3 rounds that fast, with perfect precision out of that weapon? I doubt it. I say there were other shooters. I say the Warren Commission dropped the ball on a lot. The other part of it is there's too many signs that lead to New Orleans. Those of y'all who don't know about New Orleans, in the 1960s, New Orleans was ran by one man. One. Let's look at all the ties to New Orleans here. Jim Garrison, the man who wrote the book, which became the movie that I'm watching over here on this TV. District Attorney for Orleans Parish. Lee Harvey Oswald himself spent a lot of time in New Orleans. Carlos Marcello had a well-known and well-publicized hatred. Absolutely hated Bobby Kennedy. And his famous words were, "You cut the head off the snake, the body dies." And he was right. He's quoted as saying as much on the record. The FBI reopened the JFK investigation in the 1980s because by this time Carlos Marcello was in federal prison and let a few things slip. Jack Ruby had well-known connections with the mob. Now let's look at what else was going on back in the 1960s, early 1960s. Castro had took over Cuba in 1959. When Castro took over Cuba in 1959, he actually expelled a lot of mob-owned businesses and nationalized every American business there. Under Batista, Cuba was an extension of America. At that point, U.S. businessmen and bankers lost a lot of money after the Cuban Revolution of 1959, when Castro took over and deposed Batista. You think Carlos didn't have money down there? Carlos Marcello was a good man, but he was mean and crazy. RFK had deported by force Carlos Marcello and sent him to Guatemala because Carlos Marcello used a Guatemalan passport or Guatemalan birth certificate that was forged, even though he was actually born in Tunisia. So, what have we got here? Let's see what happens. This is going to be a multi-part series, and it may take me a while. This is just the introduction of what really happened in November of 1963 to former President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Y'all stay tuned. Hope you like it. History in the Eyes of a Southerner. Your host, Anthony Allen.